Okay, so thinking on our observations and through our lens of the expectancy value theory, we started looking at the review of the literature and some and how it tied to some of our observations. So um, one of the first things is that the social component seems to be a large contributor to the success or failure of our professional development. And some of the research states very clearly across multiple sources is that there's a familiarity and a safety net when it's done by teachers, ran by teachers, for teachers. And that is exactly what some of the research by Deal shows. There's a very much a relational component of teacher social networks, and the he actually shows that these do not necessarily have to be in just the same school building, but across other schools, other districts. Of course, virtually we have that option to do so. But there's a comforting factor of support. Teachers need to feel supported through PD. And so that is one of the things that I could see obvious from the small groups that I looked. They played off each other, they fed off each other, they were sharing ideas, and the research definitely backs that up. More literature from Durr, teacher efficacy, and an increase of the amount of time, and how that increases because of the frequency of teacher and teacher engagement. And so there is a multiplication factor to the success of professional development. And I define success as the teachers using or getting enjoyment and being able to go back to their classroom and actually implement what they're learning. And there's a certain satisfaction that goes with that, I think. And I think teachers enjoy their jobs more as a result of that when they do see a payoff to what they're doing in their professional development. One of the largest components of my action research was the mandate and how that affected the motivation of my teachers. And I think that ties very closely into the research by Courtney, who focused on the state of Kentucky and how they use coaches for their PLCs. It was very clear that the teachers in Kentucky did not view their coaches as an administrator. They were viewed as another teacher. And the research shows that teachers are very, very comfortable with a coach instead of an administrator. They don't feel like they're being judged. They don't feel like they're being watched. And apparently that equates to a larger success rate of the PDs or of the PDLCs for their teachers and the implementation of whatever they're learning. And I definitely think that could be a very important factor when it comes to professional development in my school and potentially in other schools that are very similar to mine. Another component of this is the timing. And I really think if you go back to that quadrants, is the what am I going to get out of this versus what I'm going to have to give up to it. And of course, time is a huge component to a teacher's daily life. Most of my teachers have kids, young kids that are in school with them, and they have ball games, and you have to be respectful of their time. And so that time typically would be after school, and that's kind of a no-no. I think you're going to get a lack of motivation if you do this primarily after school, or any PD primarily after school. It goes back to I've got better things to do. And so that cost outweighs what they're going to get out of it. And so some benefits from the literature show that, and especially this Riggins and Knowles article, is that meetings need to be set in stone. There needs to be a dedicated time that is not going to be taking away from something they're already going to do. So if it's already set in time and it's known it's going to be set in time, teachers won't schedule things around that. And so I think there is a benefit that I'm going to apply to having a dedicated time that's mine or ours, however you want to term it, for our growth. And I think that will go a long way towards the attitude you saw that one teacher who ran out of the PDs because I had better things to do, or used their time better than I used it. Davis, which I found was a very important article, and I think it's going to shape my research going forward, is that fellow teachers need to lead the PLC, and that collaboration needs to be a key tenet. And there's 4 themes that came out of that. I'm not going to go over them now for sake of time, but it is going to be something that kind of guides my future research in this subject. But one of the big things is it ties back to some of the research. Administrators should be co-participants or an observer, not a director or a leader or a mandator, as we've seen the fireback of in my school. So what are our implications? I really believe it's all about the approach. And motivation, I think, is directly tied to the approach. Who did it come from? Was it an internal motivation? Did someone tell them to do it, or was it, because the other teachers were talking about it? And I think that's what I really tried to do in our first meetings by planting those seeds of the training. And when it came mandated, I think we really have a stark comparison of an internal versus external motivation for doing it. And I think you have to be very clear up front. What are the implications? What are the benefits? Does it outweigh the cost? Does it outweigh the duties? And so I think need to be very clear up front about what am I going to get out of this after the training. So some conclusion, effective PD has some key components. We've talked about a lot of those. I think it's very good to have lead teachers or coaches lead the training and not from an administrator. It is very doable. I think PD has become a worrisome part of some principals, some district leaders, but it is doable. All these things that I'm finding through the research and through the literature is that it is doable. But the biggest thing is that expectancy value lens. What can the teacher expect to get out of it? And does that outweigh what they're going to have to give up? And I think that up front is going to be a huge factor, especially if it comes from another teacher or a teacher who's done it or is familiar with the goals of the PD or the PLC. So here's my resources. There's where my images from, which was not a professional journal, but it was a very good, or a peer-reviewed journal, but it was a very good resource, and these are the resources from the literature. So thank you very much. And if I have any questions, my email is longs, LONGS 001 @clemson.ua.edu.